is Totally 80s, the podcast dedicated to the music of the greatest decade ever. So, turn up your Walkman, loosen that scrunchie, and get ready to talk 80s with your host, Lyndsey Parker.
Hi, I'm Lyndsey Parker from Yahoo Entertainment and SiriusXM Volume. Welcome to Totally 80s. And since we're all at home, why not take a second to follow us at Totally 80s on Facebook and Instagram, and email us your comments and show ideas to podcast@totally80s.com. As a reminder, if you'd like to see our lovely faces, you can catch this episode on video as well on our YouTube channel, Totally 80s YouTube channel, so check that out. And joining me today is the Azrael Abyss in my world, my partner in all things 80s, the other John Hughes.
I did. If you're watching on YouTube, I am dressed for the occasion. I'm not wearing a band t-shirt or anything. I'm all dark and as gothy as I get at the age of her.
You're wearing a proper colored shirt buttoned all the way up to the neck. Margaret Cho would approve. Margaret, there's no brooch though. There's no brooch, whatever you call it.
A big, medallion type granny cameo right here. I should have gone for that.
Well, there's a reason why you're dressed up for the occasion, because today, John, we are walking down Fascination Street through a forest and into the Hanging Garden. It'll be just like heaven. And obviously, you can listen to this anytime you want. You can listen to it at 10:15 on a Saturday night, Friday, when you're in love. In between days, it's up to you. So anyway, guys, if you haven't figured it out yet after all my terrible puns, today we are talking about my favorite band of all time, The Cure. And I thought I was The Cure's biggest fan until I met the fabulous woman that is our special guest. She is the biggest Cure fan I know. She is a musician and songwriter who you may know from the current lineup of Eagles of Death or from Courtney Love's band, in addition to releasing her own music, including a very awesome cover of The Cure's own A Night Like This. And I buried the lead because don't think I won't be asking her about the fact that she holds the title as the winner of Sassy Magazine's biggest Cure fan contest. So, she wins at life. We're going to talk about that and all things Cure. Welcome to the show, please. Bass phenom and Cure fan extraordinaire, Miss Jennie Vee.
Hi.
Yay!
First of all, amazing puns. I loved your intro. And yeah, you made me sound pretty awesome.
Well, you are pretty awesome. And like I said, when I found out, when John and I were figuring out what we've done a couple very artist-specific episodes of the podcast. We did a Duran Duran one. We did a Madonna one. When we finally got around to doing the one that my whole career is built up to, The Cure, and we were trying to think of a guest that would be good for this, I was like, I've got to invite Jennie, because if there's anyone who knows more about The Cure than me, it's her.
I was a little nervous before I came on the show today, brushing up on some of my Cure knowledge, because man, I was an encyclopedia when I was younger. Truly, world's biggest Cure fan. There was a contest that we'll talk about, but it was my life. The Cure was my life.
How did you get introduced to them?
I was watching MTV. I grew up in Canada and we had a satellite dish, and not everybody had that. And you had to have one to get MTV. So MTV was the source of everything for me. And I saw the video for Close to Me.
Oh,
and I was drawn to it because I was already kind of that awkward, forlorn little child who felt out of place everywhere I went. So anything that seemed different to me, what seemed different when I was really young was like Buddy Holly or the movie Xanadu, like pop culture things, but things that had kind of quirkiness to them. And it wasn't until I saw The Cure that I really, really could super relate. It's so funny. I was 10 years old, I think, about 10 years old when I saw that video. And I could relate to, a 30-year-old man like Robert Smith, but he was my guy.
Well, it's weird. It's funny that you say that, because I think I was about, 14 or 15, and I saw a video for The Walk on MTV in light rotation. I'm like, what's this baby he's holding, and he's in a kiddie pool? I don't understand this. And it kind of scared me a little bit, but I was like that fascinated kind of scared you get. And then they put Let's Go to Bed in rotation. And I'm like,
that was my introduction. Let's Go to Bed.
Right. This is that same band, but this song is super poppy and catchy, and I like it. And I went and ran out and bought the cassette for Japanese Whispers, and it's been all downhill.
But see, that's the point that I think is interesting that we can all talk about, especially you, Jennie, being a musician, is The Cure have been so many things. I'm hard pressed to think of a band that's had so many. I mean, now we kind of think of a signature sound that kind of got established with I'd say the head on the door. But leading up to that, I mean, I'm hard pressed to think of a band that went through more artistic transitions. Like they're up there with like Bowie and the Beatles and Beck in terms of doing different things. So your introduction was close to me. Me and John, our introduction was like the Japanese Whispers era. What's crazy though, this is crazy how I really got into The Cure. So I was, so Anglophilic. I think we all were pretty Anglophilic because of MTV. And I had seen the Let's Go to Bed video and the Walk and probably the Love Cats video at this point. And then my grandparents went on a trip to Europe and they were going to go to London. And to me, that was the mecca of everything. Like, that's where all the cool music's from. So I asked my grandparents if they would go to a record store and get me some records by some of my favorite bands. I swear to God, I probably had 35 bands on the list, more vinyl they could bring back. But they brought me back 2 records. One was by Howard Jones and the other one was by a band on the top of the list called The Cure. This would have been 84. And so I know they just, I love the vision of my grandparents doing this, but I know they just must have walked into any random store and said, do you have a Cure record for our granddaughter? So they probably were just handed the most recent one. So they brought me home the top, my grandparents, okay, a vinyl. And if your only knowledge of The Cure at that point were those 3 poppy MTV videos, 2 of which were when they were just the duo of Robert and Lowell Tolhurst, that's a mind F. Like I was like, what? I was like, is this the same Cure? Like, are there 2 Cures? Is this like the Cure UK? Because it was like acid trippy and completely effed up and like psychedelic and kind of ugly, but like ugly in a good way. And I liked it too, and that blew my mind. And then of course was the commercial breakthrough. But then I went back, and then there was like the very early album, which is almost like a Buzzcocks pop, post-punk pop album, and then the really dark stuff from the 3 records that followed that through Pornography. So like they've done it all, and I'm curious, you guys, what's your favorite incarnation of The Cure? Is it kind of like James Bond, where like the first one you've discovered is always going to be James Bond to you? Like, is The Cure to you, Jenny, always going to be Head on the Door? Is it for you, John, always going to be The Walk? Like, what's the archetype of The Cure for you guys?
Well, it's interesting. I want to go back to what you were saying about how their early catalog was so diverse. And in those first 5 years to go from 3 Imaginary Boys through 17 Seconds Faith, Pornography, and then to the top, which was so obscure and weird. That was 5 years, I think.
Wow. Yeah, about that.
I've done like 1 record in the past 5 years. They ran the gamut and did so many diverse things and sounds. And the top was an interesting one for me. I love the song Banana Fish Bones. And one great thing about The Cure is that there's so many great literary references in their music. I had never heard of Albert Camus before I heard Killing an Arab, and I read about what inspired him to write that song. So of course I got into Camus, and Banana Fish Bones led me to Salinger. So here we are at the top. And for me, getting back to your question, it will be the Head on the Door. That's my favorite Cure album, and that's my holy trinity of albums by any artist. It's Head on the Door, Kiss Me, and Disintegration.
It's funny because I have a habit of flying out to other countries to see bands, and The Cure I've done a couple times. I went to the Hyde Park show a couple years ago, flew out to London. I think I remember I told you about that. I think I used Jenny. That was amazing. That was the 40th anniversary. But a few years before that, they did the trilogy of albums. They did the first 3 albums. They did 3 Imaginary Boys, 17 Seconds of Faith at the Opera House in Sydney, the Sydney Opera House, and I went for that. So he considered that a trilogy. And then Robert Smith once said in interviews when Blood Flowers came out that he saw Pornography, even though they're not consecutive, Pornography, Disintegration, and Blood Flowers as a trilogy.
That's right.
I think the trilogy you just mentioned, if they ever did a show that was Head on the Door, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, and Disintegration together,
I would actually die.
I would lose my.
It would be a 7-hour show.
That's fine. I got time. I haven't seen show in months. I got to make up for time. I haven't been out of my house in months. But yes, I agree with you. I think for a lot of people, Head on the Door was an entry point. My upbringing was a lot different from yours, Jenny, in the sense that I grew up in LA, not where are you, Sudbury? That's a real small town in Canada, right?
Ontario, Canada. The only other person you might know from there is Alex Trebek, but it's a mining town about 4 hours north of Toronto, and I think the population's about 150,000 now. But when I was growing up there, it was like 80,000, and I actually grew up on a farm half hour outside of Sudbury. So I was way out there.
See, because I grew up in LA with K-Rock, where the Head on the Door, and actually probably from like Japanese Whispers on, but certainly when Head on the Door came out, they were the high rotation band, and they were so huge here. And that was Head on the Door is when they kind of became, for all intents and purposes, a pop band. That's when they, were playing, from that point on, when they came to LA, they were playing Dodger Stadium, amphitheaters, arenas. But you had a real different, and I know John grew up in a small town too. So
I'm shaking my head because even for the same country, such a polar opposite experience that you had. Small town, much like Jenny, Midwest, and I had to special order Head on the Door from Camelot Music. I carry it. I had to special order Japanese Whispers from Cam's record shop in Elyria, Ohio. And it's funny because Head on the Door, I think, is my favorite as well. But I have these weird ebbs and flows. Pornography, Faith, took me so long to get into. I like the singles, because I heard them on Staring at the Sea and everything. I'm like, oh, and I go into the album like, whoa, this is really dark. Now I love those records. There are two pure records I just can't get into no matter how hard I try. And I know this wasn't the question, but I cannot do the top no matter how hard I try. Sorry, everybody.
Wow.
And Blood Flowers. I bang my head against the wall. Does every song have to be an 8-minute
at the risk of sounding, I don't want to, I love The Cure so much,
Jenny.
but I do feel they kind of peaked with disintegration.
I'm not into Blood Flowers.
Okay.
But
good.
the top, we need to convince you that the top is worth, for the Caterpillar alone, that's such a great record.
Great single. I think what happened was Japanese Whispers, so poppy. I'm ready for this next record. And then this comes and I buy it and it just hits me in the face like a frying pan. I'm like, whoa, what?
So my James Bond analogy was true in your case. You'd set a template in your mind. I'm very curious if this would be something, if we talk to any Cure fan of any age, demographic, background, if the first Cure record they heard, if it was, Pornography, for instance, or if it was Japanese Whispers, or if it was Kiss Me, if that makes it so that is the standard of Cure for them forever. But I will think that one of the things that threads together all of these records, which have had not just very different styles, but of course, a really different lineup. My God, if every person who ever played in The Cure got together for a reunion concert, it would look like We Are the World, a goth Rio the World. It would be like 30 people together, arm in arm, singing. I'm perfectly fine with that. All of them singing a forest together for charity. Probably won't happen. But there were, they've had so many different band members and so many different styles. But the common thread, of course, is Robert Smith. But I think it's not just his voice, which is one of the most distinctive voices in singing, but in music, but also his lyrics. Anyone who grew up in suburbia, any type of suburbia, could really relate to the lyrics because, if you know anything about the background that Robert and Lowell grew up in, they grew up in a pretty depressed, outside of London, small town. I've talked to Lowell Tolhurst about this because he obviously wrote a memoir a couple years ago, and I was like, you are not the ambassador for Crawley. The Crawley Tourism Board is not going to hire you as a spokesperson. He does not speak very well of that town. And I think a lot of people living in small towns, be it in England or, in America, even me, I say I grew up in LA, but I grew up in the Valley. So it's not like I was hanging out in Hollywood when I was 12. I was like in suburbs. I think we all could kind of connect to it. And I'm really curious, you, Jenny, because it seems like you grew up between the three of us in the smallest town, the most remote town. You probably were like the only Cure fan. Unlike me, you were like the only Cure fan in your town. Like, what was it about that like connected to you when you were feeling like an outsider?
There was something that I could really relate to. The town I grew up in was small and also a very dreary, desolate kind of place. The landscape up there, I don't know if you guys know about the Canadian Shield, but it's very rocky and it's the oldest exposed rock on Earth. So I think NASA did testing there before the moon landing. If the moon landing actually even happened, whole other episode if we want to talk about that. The town was rocky and desolate and cold. In the summer, sure, it could be beautiful, but just I'm not the ambassador for Sudbury, the greater Sudbury area either, like Crawley. I think it's just a grim, gray place where most people don't leave. And I could feel that. And from a young age, I just had the sense of wanting to get out and needing to escape. So The Cure kind of became my escape in that town, and other bands too. But of course, The Cure were on the top of the list. Music was everything to me, and it was like a fantasy world. I decorated my room with all Cure posters. I painted it purple. I hung a chandelier, and I'm like a young kid. But that's how I could express myself. It's where I found my own sense of creativity and expression. So that it gave me something to do. It was more than just listening to music. It became my world. And being up there, just like John, I had to special order everything. And then I found a Cure fan club called Other Voices that was based in Norman, Oklahoma. And I had pen pals. And that was my social network. And we would trade tapes and we would send each other these amazing packages, decorated. We photocopied pictures from magazines and paint them with watercolors. It was really an epic kind of a pre-internet social network. So I think I had 80 pen pals at one point.
But that's important stuff you just mentioned about how, first of all, music is a lifeline for kids in small towns, especially back then, because it was for me too. And it showed me a window outside of my small town that, oh, there's something happening out there that I can escape, for lack of a better word, and get to where I want to be. And the Cure were definitely a part of that. And I had a different experience than you in that you joined a pen pal club and made friends from everywhere. I forced the Cure upon all my friends. You're going to listen to this band and you're going to like them. I don't put that Judas Priest cassette away.
Yeah. Did it work?
I converted all of them to like Cure fans, and stuck with some of them. They became total goths like me and new wave guys, whatever you want to call it back then. And some of them were like, I still like Def Leppard, but that one Cure song's pretty darn good. It was Push.
Well, they must have loved the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony last year. Then when both bands got in, there's something for everyone. But there's a point I want to make about what you guys are talking about, which I think is really interesting. So when I was a kid, obviously we've established a huge Cure fan, and I loved Robert Smith's lyrics so much that I would make kind of my own fake poetry. I would write things that I thought, I'm not a musician, but I'm a writer. I wrote this poetry.
You could have won the Sassy contest.
We're going to talk about that. I would have come in second to you because you really committed. But I wrote poems and I put them all in I typed them up on, a typewriter. I'm old enough that I had to do that, and printed them out wrote them out. And it was called Blood on the Mirror. I don't know why. It sounds morose. So I was just like it was almost like Mad Libs, like those magnets with words on them. I was like taking words that are in like Cure songs and putting them together.
It's a good title. I'm not hating.
So it was like a couple hundred pages, at least 100 pages. And I presented them to my parents proudly. I was like, look, I'm a writer now. And they were like, oh, it was like that suicidal tendency song. Like, we're afraid you're going to hurt someone and we're afraid you're going to hurt yourself. Lyndsey, are you okay? Is there something you want to talk about? They started talking about like Richard Ramirez because he was like prowling the valley at the time. And, he was the valley killer. They're like, well, he liked a lot of like satanic lyrics. So look what happened. I don't think they were necessarily saying, we think you're a serial killer. They were like, we're worried about you. And I was so bummed because it was like, oh, I was just trying to like write like Robert Smith, like you don't get it. And of course it all worked out. But my point is, and this happened with the Columbine shooting in Marilyn Manson. It definitely happened with people like Judas Priest, actually. And this idea that music that has darkness in it in any shape or form, just darker lyrics, darker themes, is a bad influence on kids or taps into bad things in kids. When I actually would say this of emo music, I would say this of any goth music. Like, I think this music saves people. I would say the Cure probably saved a lot of people, despite my parents' alarm. I think they saved me, So I'm curious, either of you guys, how you would think that this music, the Cure's music, saved you guys.
It saved me 100%. When I felt like I had nothing and that I was nowhere, I turned to the Cure. It was my world. And furthermore, it inspired me. Their music inspired me to play music myself. And if I didn't have that, I so strongly identify with myself through music that without it, I can't even imagine who I would be, which maybe that's scary to say that without that you're nobody, but it's just who I am, and it's my life and my world and my path. And if it wasn't for this particular band, I don't know what else would have inspired me to do that. And I truly can't imagine, I sometimes get asked, well, what would you do if you weren't a musician? I have no answer. So if I didn't have this band that inspired me so much in so many ways to lead me to pick up, I'm looking at my basses right now, it's truly because of this band that I was inspired to do that. And more so Simon Gallup and his playing, and knowing that I wanted to play bass.
I was just about to ask you that, because I think obviously, like I said, there's been a lot of people in The Cure, but Simon's a very consistent member of The Cure since '85 and a little bit before that. And I think he's the secret weapon, or to you, it's not a secret, but I think he's the secret weapon of this band. I think when you think of what would be considered a riff in a Cure song, it's actually the bass line, like when you think, and I'm curious how he influenced your bass player. Is the reason you picked up a bass as opposed to another instrument was because of him?
There's something very, very grounded about him and his playing. From one big thing that I always noticed when I was a kid about Simon was how he stood when he played, how he was literally like there was a magnetic force pulling him into the earth. He was so grounded, but also so free. And he played with his whole body. It was very it still is. He's a very powerful bass player. And I just wanted to be like that. And I wanted to embody that. And when I got my first bass, I feel like it rooted me into that, almost like magic, because I can easily get in my head and be too airy and all up here and thinking of, worrying or overanalyzing things. And as soon as I play bass, it all goes away. So it's something about his stance and his groundedness and his rooted nature just really, really inspired me. I can kind of put it into words now, but I couldn't explain it when I was younger.
Are there certain Cure bass lines that you think are especially, I mean, we all think of a Forest, of course, but are there certain Cure bass lines that you think are especially like iconic?
Fascination Street. It's super simple. It's one of the first ones I learned to play. So that one comes to mind instantly. A Night Like This is amazing. I did the cover of that song. And what I did with my version of A Night Like This was, over the years I noticed with the live performance of the songs, little things change. Little extra notes are thrown in, or a different riff happens. So I took some of his live elements from the song and I incorporated them into my version. Subtle things, and maybe if you weren't a bass player, you wouldn't notice, or maybe you would subconsciously notice. But I really love that one, and I love how it's evolved, staying super true to the original, but there's little changes that I noticed live Robert does it too with his vocals. He throws different in all the time. So there's that one. Gosh, I think they're all so good.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Simon, but Screw is just built around an entire bass line.
Exactly. Going back to one of our favorite albums, or maybe our favorite.
Right. I'm just going to say, Simon is in there with I think I was going to say a holy trinity, but now there's four of them I'm thinking of bassists that are just the best bassists. Andy Rourke from the Smiths, Les Pattinson from Echo and the Bunnymen, and of course Hooky from New Order. And then you've got Simon. I mean, those four, that square, there you go, are just, they broke that the cliche of here's the bottom end, that's all you're getting. And they made melodies. They made music.
Let's make it a 5-point star and throw John Taylor into that mix. Let's just throw
John Taylor.
Well, he's not quite as dark sounding, but certainly an iconic bassist. But I want to, since you mentioned Fascination Street, Jenny, I want to ask about Disintegration, because a lot of people, myself included, think that was the high point of their recording career. It was their most commercially successful record, and that was when they played Dodger. They played one of the most epic shows ever. It was Dodger Stadium, and the opening acts were Love and Rockets and the Pixies. It was amazing. That was when they hit their, critical peak as well as their commercial peak. But what I love about this record was that they thought it was commercial suicide at the time. They thought because it was coming off of two more poppy records, of course, The Head on the Door and Kiss Me had lots of dark moments, but not the way Disintegration did. I've interviewed Robert Smith about this, where he's talked about the fact that that kind of success that was happening wasn't sitting that well with him. It was a lot. So he kind of wanted to make a record that willfully moved away from that. And then he ended up having the biggest record of his career. Like, what's your take on the fact that a record like that was so huge in 1989, which was a great year for alternative music?
I remember listening to interviews with Robert at the time, and I know he said it before, but he was saying that it was definitely The Cure's last album. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Totally.
And it also coincided with him turning 30. So he felt that his time in music and rock and roll, or however you want to categorize it, was over. And so I was devastated because I wanted them to keep making records, and I had to go see them, and I had to go see them as much as I could. I was 13 years old at the time, and I believed the man. I shouldn't have, but I remember him having, I think he was going through the turning 30. Like you were saying, I think some of the success wasn't sitting well with him, maybe some pressure. So he wanted to rebel against the hopes that he would do something super, super commercial and poppy. And this is what
he was getting married too, I believe, right around that time.
Yeah, 88. I think I know he got married in 1988 at a Benedictine monastery to Mary Poole, his childhood sweetheart. So yeah, I think he was going through a lot at the time, leading up to making that record. And it's funny to me, every time I hear that it was their most commercially successful record, it's true. I think of how dark it is and how epic and long some of the songs are, and that this was the one, which is, I waver with Head on the Door and Disintegration being, they're almost tied for my favorite.
Well, Disintegration did have their one top 10 hit, which was the song he wrote as the wedding song for Mary, Love Song, which was, definitely, along with, I'd say, probably Lullaby, the most poppy song on that album, or the most lighthearted song on that album. And
it was about a spider eating you, or something like that.
Well, lighthearted by Cure standards. But I remember, because I just said that 1989 was such a great year in music, and also that Love and Rockets opened that show at the Dodger Stadium. I remember, I can't remember the order. John is really good with charts, but he'll remember this. But there was one week where where Love Song and So Alive by Love and Rockets occupied spots 2 and 3. John, you'll tell me who was 2 and who was 3.
I believe Love Song got to number 2.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, so basically we had ex-members of Bauhaus, whatever. We had Love and Rockets and The Cure in the top 3, in the top 40. And there's some people, like kind of alternative rock purists, which I sometimes, when I was a teenager, had a sense to go like, oh, I hate that my music's popular now. It's easy to think that. But I just remember feeling like we won. Like, this is cool. Like, the bands that I've liked for a while are now reaching big audiences, and people are realizing this is great stuff. And I imagine that some people felt a couple of years later when a band like Nirvana and all the bands they ushered in got big. It's like, we won. The cool music now rules. But I just remember how significant that was, that Love and Rockets and The Cure could be in the top. I think the number 1 song that week was like Paula Abdul or someone like that. John would maybe know. But
that's absolutely what happened. You had all this 120 minutes alternative nation stuff bubbling under the surface from like 85, 86. And these bands just, first and foremost, kept putting out great stuff, number 1. And then you had labels that were actually putting some money behind it at the time and pushing it at a major level. And so by 88, 89, you had the Replacements had a top 100, Hot 100 hit, for God's sake. You have The Cure finally breaking through. You have a song like Lullaby scraping, the Hot 100 as well. That lighthearted song about being consumed by a spider. Lyndsey. You have Pictures of You, doing Fascination Street almost made the top 40. I think it got like 44 or 45. Fascination Street. What?
One thing that I think people sort of forget because of what people think the word alternative means, and I did just mention Nirvana, but before the grunge or whatever, the alternative rock explosion of the 90s thing happened, this was what alternative rock was. It was Depeche Mode, it was The Cure, it was New Order, Echo and the Bunnymen. This is what K-Rock was.
College rock is what they called it.
Yeah. So we're talking a lot about stuff we, our childhood and, love of The Cure and how it shaped our lives. So we can't delay it any longer. I just wanted to keep people in suspense for a moment. Jenny, I give you the floor. The reason why you're, such a Cure fan is because Sassy decreed it. So you hold the title. I need the whole, this story is so epic. I have an epic childhood story I'm going to tell afterwards, but I want you to go first because yours is better.
I truly wish I still had all the memorabilia from these days, and I don't even have photographic evidence of this. So you'll just have to take my word for it. This is true. Sassy magazine, for those of you who might not remember, was a really cool, I guess it was on the cusp of the alternative, wave that was upon us. And there was a lady named Jane Pratt, and she started the magazine. And I liked it. It was cool. It was different. It wasn't your typical teen magazine, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. And The Cure had just released Disintegration. This was 1990. So they had finished touring for it and they were doing Mixed Up. Do you guys remember? I know this is the 80s show, which this is the tail end of the 80s. So there was a remix album, Mixed Up, and they were going to release it. And to promote that, there was a full page ad in Sassy magazine. I was flipping through. Get mixed up with The Cure. Prove you're the world's biggest Cure fan, and you're going to get a truly mixed up like mystery prize. I don't think that was the terminology, but they didn't say what it was, or a prize pack with one truly great item. So I thought, oh my God, like maybe it's a trip to London. Maybe you get to go to Fiction Records and hang out there for the day, or meet the band, or who knows, right? It was very mysterious. So I was already motivated. I'm going to win. I'm the world's biggest Cure fan. No problem. I got this. And my teenage brain's going crazy, and it's completely taken over my life. The contest came out in September. The deadline was December. So I had some time here to work on this. And like Lyndsey, I also fancied myself a bit of a poet. And I had collected many poems that, she loves this part, that speaking of blood, I signed them all in blood.
I do love that part. You are right.
Commitment.
Dramatic pause. Mm-hmm. Yes, I did. How old was I? 13? Yeah, signing my poetry in blood. So I had to expand that collection. I decided 365 poems dedicated to The Cure. That's a good number. And I was probably up to about 100. So furiously in school, after school, at any time, I was writing poetry, and usually in response to a song. So I'd listen to a song and kind of stream of consciousness, write the song, sign it in blood, put it in the black duotang that I decorated with red nail polish. It was a whole thing. And then beyond that, I thought, this isn't enough. What if somebody else out there, like Lyndsey, somewhere out there, has poetry like this? So I decided I needed to construct a dollhouse, a Cure dollhouse. And I remember reading that Robert Smith liked Christmas and Christmas lights and decorations. So the whole thing was Christmas themed. And because December was the deadline, I made it Christmas themed. I painted every room. It was 3 floors. I tiled the floors. I had little miniature Christmas trees with little black spider decorations, the whole thing. I made dolls. I made a Robert Smith doll. I had a little shirt buttoned up like that, everything. And so that was my entry. And I put the poetry book in the dollhouse, packed this thing up, was like, I don't even know, 3 feet in a box, FedExed it. I spent like $200 sending this thing. I had 2 jobs at the time. Send it to New York, and I won.
Did you ever get the dollhouse back? Where's the dollhouse now?
I don't know. No, I never did.
Did you take a photo of it?
No, I never did.
What was the prize?
The prize was the entire Cure discography, which I already had, and it was cool to get that in long CD long boxes.
Okay.
So that was kind of cool, and it was an autograph poster, a self-portrait that Robert had painted of himself. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, and it was autographed, and that was my prize. So I was happy, a little bit disappointed. I thought I was going to be going on some amazing world journey.
But the prize was having the title. Did they run your photo in the magazine, or your name or anything?
They ran the names, and when I was notified with the letter with the Sassy return address, the little logo on the envelope, so that came in the mail, and I opened it, and they listed the top 10, and there were a couple of my pen pals on there.
Oh, how cute!
Were in, second place, third place, but my name was on the top. I freaked out.
I am dying to know where the dollhouse ended up. I can't imagine anyone would have tossed it, or it's got to be someone took it. Someone.
I don't know.
Maybe
I want it. Have you? I know that you've obviously crossed paths a lot with The Cure now that you're a professional musician touring the world yourself. Jennie, have you ever told Robert or anyone else in The Cure this story? Do they know about this contest and the dollhouse and all that? Or are you too embarrassed to tell them you signed 365 poems in blood for them?
I didn't tell any of them.
I'm with you. I can't tell you how many artists I've met in my job, and I have to keep my mouth shut about.
Yeah. But that's such a good story. That's such a good story. It sounds a little weird, but the commitment, especially because now you are crafty. Now you make clothes. You did this Kickstarter for your own fashion line. You make things. This was not just the beginning of your music career, kind of just the parallel beginning of all the DIY stuff you do, which is so cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I had always sewn. My grandfather was a tailor. He was a Croatian immigrant, and he was a tailor, and he had a little shop. And so I always sewed. And from a young age, I made clothes that I wanted because I couldn't find a blue velvet cape. And Sudbury, Ontario. They just didn't have that.
I'm with you. We had to do it. We had to like go to a thrift store and find those parts and do some clothes hacking.
Exactly.
Well, I have a couple. I'll combine them into one because they happen within a year of each other. But I have a good teenage Cure story. It's not as good as yours. I should have probably gone first now that I think about it. It's too late. So the year was 1985. I had my first boyfriend, Patrick. Hi, Patrick, if you're listening. And he wasn't the guy who turned me on to the Cure. I already said that I got turned on to the Cure by MTV and by this random record that came back from England with my grandparents. But I kind of got more into the Cure because of him. He was the one kid at my school who was all Robert Smith hair and all that. So like I immediately gravitated towards him and we definitely bonded. And he turned me on to a lot of the Cure music that I didn't know about. And we had tickets to go see the Cure at Irvine Meadows Amphitheater for the Head on the Door tour. About, I'd say, a week before he broke up with me. So I was doubly crushed. I don't actually know which I was more upset about. Was I more upset that my first boyfriend had dumped me, or was I more upset that my first boyfriend, who had a car, was going to drive me to Irvine Meadows, which was an hour and a half away from my house? Like, how was I going to get to see the Cure? So I was bummed, but I immediately put out an APB around school. Is anyone going down to the show? I'll give you gas money. And long story, skip ahead, I got a ride, and it was with 3 guys who went to my high school who I did not know. But they picked me up, and I gave them gas money. We went down. By the time we got down there 2 hours later, we were friends. And this is the part that I didn't know. We get out of the car, and the guy who was driving the car gets out all of these laminates, or these like sticky laminates, out of his bag. Turns out his dad works for the promoter. And he's like, okay, guys, meet you backstage afterwards. We'll all meet at the backstage door. And I was like, wait, what? What? Like backstage, like to me, backstage was like, almost famous stuff. Like, I didn't know. All I wanted was to get there. So enjoy the show. Afterwards, we all go backstage. And of course, to me, backstage at that point makes me think I'm going to be like in a trailer with Robert Smith, like eating pizza. But, now we all know it's really like hospitality area, which means you're in a party area, but the band's nowhere to be found. But we're hanging out. This is the 80s where people were a lot more lax. So we're like drinking beer. No one's carding us. We're having the time of our lives. The place starts to empty out. The Cure are not coming back. And we've already missed curfew because we're like an hour and a half away from, where we live. The people I'm with are like, well, let's go home. It's getting late. And I'm like, I see their tour bus over the fence. I'm like, their tour bus is still here. The band is still here. Can't we just wait a little bit longer? I convinced them to stay. The hospitality area literally closes out, or like, I don't know why they weren't shooing us out, but the hospitality area is literally just us, a custodial worker, and the bartender. And everyone's like, come on, let's just go. And then guess what? The Cure walk backstage. All 5 of them. Just us. They shrug and sit down at a table with us. They're like, hey guys, what's up? So we're like, oh my God, the Cure are here. So we ended up hanging out with them for like, I don't know, about an hour, I would say. We're drinking beer with them. We're smoking cigarettes with them. I remember talking to Robert a lot about Disneyland. He's into Disneyland, and they were going to Disneyland for their first time the next day. And so we were, it was just amazing. I can't even remember. This is what I remember the most. I mean, it wasn't just awesome that I met the Cure. It was the fact that they were not treating us like crazy fans. We were kids. We were high school age kids. There's no way they could have thought we were adults, but they were just talking to us. So finally we get home after they decide to leave. It's like 4:30 in the morning when we get home. I didn't think to call my mom. I didn't have enough change for the payphone. So when I get home, hours past my curfew, she is livid and she's beside herself and she is ready to ground me for life. But it's worth it, right? So before she can even start yelling at me, Mom, oh my God, I met the Cure, oh my God. I had a disc camera, okay? So I had slid that into my purse. You weren't supposed to bring cameras in, but it was skinny. So I'd slid the disc camera in my purse. I had photos with all of the Cure. I asked. So I said, can I go do the 1 hour photo tomorrow, please, please, please? Develop them. And she says, my mom's actually pretty cool. She went, never do this again. She's like, I understand why you didn't call. But you should have called, but, I'll let it slide because I know how important this was to you. She did me a 1 hour photo next day. I didn't just get like one copy of each photo. I got 8x10s for my locker and for, poster size for my wall. And I got like, wallet size. I actually used to carry these around like in bulk. And when I just wanted to impress someone, I would be like, hey guys, I met the Cure. It was like a business card for me. Here's a picture of me with Robert Smith. Here's a picture of me with Sassy. Enjoy. And then if the following day at school, Monday, I'm wearing my Cure t-shirt and stupid Patrick walked up. He's wearing his. And he's like, hey, did you ever find a ride to the Cure? And I'm like, I sure did. I hand him one of the photos. I'm like, yeah, and I met The Cure too. And this was a lie, because actually the great lesson to learn from this is sometimes it's great when you get dumped, because if I had just gone to the show with him, I would have had a good time, but none of this would have happened.
When a door closes, another opens.
Exactly. So I said to him, oh, it's too bad we didn't go together, because if we did, I probably could have introduced you to The Cure. And I like walk off. My drop. Okay. So I became all popular with my goth friends, but this was instrumental in a lot of ways. One, again, learn the lesson about, some things happen for a reason. But I will actually say this is kind of how I got into wanting to be in the music business. It sounds so cheesy and kind of almost groupie-ish to say, but the fact that my first experience backstage, I had this wonderful experience where the band was nice to me and friendly, and everybody acted like I was supposed to be there. Like no one thought it was weird that I was there. No one was trying to kick me out. That, people were serving me alcohol. People were like taking pictures with me. Made me go, I want to kind of do this. I kind of want to like be part. I want to have a reason to be here. Not just as a fan. I want to work in the music business. I want to be backstage hanging out where the action is every night. About a year later, they came back to LA to tour for Standing on a Beach. And I found out where they were staying. It was the Sunset Marquis Hotel. Every time I go to the Sunset Marquis Hotel, and I've gone there many times since because lots of rock stars stay there. But they were staying there. I took a bus. It took an hour and a half from the Valley. There were about 10 people hanging out outside. The Sunset Marquis made us wait. It understandably made us wait across the street, but they let us wait. We heard they were coming out. We saw a limo or some kind of fancy car come out. They were going to LAX. And they were about to get in their car when they saw that there were, not a huge crowd, but like 10, 15 gothy looking kids waiting for them. Robert Smith gestured for everyone. They were already getting in the car. Robert Smith gestured for them to get out of the car. They went across the street with us. Probably spent about 20 minutes talking to everybody, taking every photo asked of them, autographing everything, talking to people. And to the point where the chauffeur was literally like, get in the car now or you're going to miss your flight. So years later, I interview Robert Smith, and I have these photos from when we met both of the times in my purse. And I'm thinking, do I want to tell him all these things that I like waited in front of his hotel room for 5 hours to, get a photo with him, that I like did this back. I didn't tell, but I ended up telling him. I waited till the interview was over, and I said, oh, I have something I want to show you, Robert. And I hope you don't think I'm weird. And he goes, oh, God, is it a tattoo? So I guess he gets a lot of that, like people with Robert Smith tattoos. I said no. So I told him the two stories I just told you, shorter versions of them. And when I told him the one about the ex-boyfriend, he looked at me, he goes, actually, that is a really good story. I said, I just want to thank you because I don't know if I'd be doing, well, thank you for so many reasons, but I don't know if I'd be doing this in the business if, for lack of a nice, if you've been a dick to me. Well, if meeting my first hero, whether it was backstage at that Head on the Door concert or a year later at the Sunset Marquis, if you've been a jerk to me, maybe it would have soured me on the whole, it would disillusion me or whatever. But I go, you took the time to talk with me twice. And I go, I was especially impressed by the fact that when, you saw that there were fans waiting for you in front of the hotel, you made the effort to like cross the street and talk to everybody. And I remember him saying, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, well, how hard is it really to talk to someone for a couple minutes who's like made all this effort to like come see you or to talk to you? He's like, how hard is it to take 2 minutes out of your day to talk to someone? And I'm like, well, as someone who's worked in the business now for a long time and met many celebrities, I can tell you not all celebrities think that way. So these were stories that meant a lot to me and kind of, I think, put us, like, we all have a story that put us to where we are now. But I think that's why, 30 years later, Jenny and I are still so enamored with The Cure is like the connection that the fans for The Cure have. I know, Jenny, your experiences with like the fan club and all that. It's like there aren't too many bands that have that this many years into their career that I could think of.
I think the most important thing from that story is for Jenny to know that Robert Smith likes Disney. So when you make your next dollhouse, I have a question for both of you, and I'll start with mine first. What is, and it doesn't have to be 80s, what is the one Cure song that you love that you wish everybody else knew about? Mine is the 13th from Wild Mood Swings, which
interesting choice.
First of all, why would they ever pick that as a single, the lead single from an album?
That's like the kind of flamenco-y one, right?
Flamenco mariachi. It's kind of got a chorus, but not really. And it's one of those songs you hear and you're like, what the heck bad. You play it again and again, and by the third or fourth time, you're like, this is the most brilliant single ever released, and nobody knows about it.
No, what's really weird is I actually listened to that song today, John.
Oh, wow. How funny.
I just had Spotify, because I was kind of getting in the mood for this. So as I was getting ready, I had the Spotify, This Is the Cure, list on, and that song came up. And I hadn't thought about that song in a long time. And you're right. I actually did not like Wild Mood Swings when it came out. I thought it was kind of one of their weakest records. And I probably maybe would still stand by that assessment because they've had so many strong records. But I do like that song, actually. What about you, Jenny? What's your unexpected lost gem?
I love Just One Kiss.
That was my number 2.
Great memories, John. It was a B-side of Let's Go to Bed or the
Walk. It was on Japanese Whispers.
But it was that era for sure to take it back to that.
A groovy little song is Speak My Language.
Yeah.
With the bass. I mean, it's funky. I don't know. Maybe it's jazzy more than funky.
And he scats.
Yeah, exactly. It's super weird. I was just thinking of kind of strange, maybe lesser known tunes, but
those are 2 of them.
Yeah, I love Sinking off Head on the Door. It's kind of deeper into the album. It's a good one. We could talk about this one.
From the Head on the Door era, I sort of I mentioned that the second time I went to see The Cure, the time I met them at the Sunset Marquee, outside the Sunset Marquee, was around the Standing on a Beach tour, and that was what a abundance of riches that was when the Stand on the Beach compilation came out, because you had it on cassette.
That was my first one, the cassette with everything.
You got all those B-sides. At that era, I mean, they've had so many good B-sides, but at that era, all the B-sides on Standing on the Beach, I think, were at the same level as the Head on the Door actual album cuts. I have said before, this is my favorite Cure song of all time, but I fluctuate between this and Love Cats, which is a more obvious choice. But one of my top 2 favorite Cure songs ever is The Exploding Boy, which was a B-side from the Head on the Door era. I loved all the B-sides from that point. I liked, Stop Dead and A Few Hours After This. But The Exploding Boy is such a great... It has a similar kind of guitar strummy thing that In Between Days has. But when The Cure played in, I think, 2017, they did 3 shows at the Hollywood Bowl. All of them sold out. And they had, with the kind of catalog they had different set lists. Obviously there are certain songs they have to play, but they had different set lists every night. And I'm so happy because one of the nights I went, they played The Exploding Boy. I screamed. I startled people around me. I didn't think I'd ever hear that one live. That is I encourage people to get that. And, but all of the B-sides from the Head on the Door era, the stuff I think they could have made the Head on the Door a double album like they did Kiss Me if they had wanted to. It was that high quality stuff. So that's definitely one of my favorite rarities. We're pretty much out of time, but if anyone wants to end with what their favorite, if they haven't already said it, their favorite Cure memory is, I have a couple more, but I want to make sure you guys get the floor.
Well, I wore a wedding dress to the Wish Tour show in Toronto, July 17th, 1992. So we just had the anniversary of that. And I had front row tickets. I made sure of that. And a couple of my pen pals had flown in from other places. So it was a really special thing for us. Yeah, someone from Utah, one from LA, and another girl from East Coast of Canada. And it was about 6 of us. And it was really amazing. And we stayed at the Four Seasons where the Cure was staying. So it was just a really, really great couple days. And I wore the wedding dress and I had a veil. And at one point, I don't remember what song it was, I think it was during High, because this was the Wish Tour. I threw it on stage and Robert caught it and floated it around my wedding veil. I did tell him the story and he remembered.
He remembered. That's again, it's so cool. And I mean, I'm sure he has, especially with the nature of the Cure's lyrics, he probably has some kind of crazy fans. That's probably why when I first said, I have a story for you, he was like, oh God, you have a tattoo. But I think he really does actually appreciate how much his music has affected his fans. I think he really
have a tattoo as well.
What about you, John? Oh, sorry.
Well, first of all, dare we ask?
Yeah.
The tattoo?
Yes.
I drew it on a binder when I was 14, a little spider web in the corner, a little spider, and I wrote The Cure in their classic kind of twisty Kiss Me writing. And I took it to some biker in town, and it's here. It's hard to read. It's a little blurry, but I drew it, and it says The Cure, and it's a spider web.
Oh, there you go. Okay, John. I don't know if you have any tattoos.
I've got all mine are Bowie tattoos. Sorry.
That's acceptable. But what is your favorite Cure memory, if you haven't already volunteered?
Do. It's not anything really having to do with meeting the band or anything like that. Just imprinted on my mind is, a 14-year-old kid in Elyria, Ohio, doing a paper route, delivering the Chronicle Telegram at 6 a.m. on a snowy Sunday morning with a huge newspaper bag around me with my Walkman and hearing, Just One Kiss or The Upstairs Room in my ears while the snow's falling on a Sunday morning, just trudging through the neighborhood delivering papers. It sounds horrible, but it's such a nice memory for me.
It sounds nice. I'll end by saying that my weird memory that I think, there are some kids that remember the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. There are people that, mention in the moon landing. There are certain things that people remember. I remember when Robert Smith cut his hair. It was a big ass deal. Cure. It was commemorized in the Cure in Orange, which was directed by Tim Pope, who obviously directed a lot of the big videos we've talked about, like Close to Me and Let's Go to Bed and The Walk. He directed all the big videos. And the scene where Simon Gallup grabs the wig off of Robert's head, and you see that he has short hair now. And that's what's so funny is in the second set of photos that I have, the ones where I met the Cure at the Sunset Marquee, a lot of people be like, oh, that's a nice picture of you with John Cusack. And I'm like, no, it's Robert, because he had short hair at the time. But the funny way is I remember, because, we didn't have the internet then, the news traveled shorter. A lot of kids found out that Robert Smith had cut his hair off when they saw him in concert. And he was doing that shtick with the wig before. And what's really funny is I was on a vacation to visit a family friend in Chicago, and we went out to see the Cure in Chicago that year on the Standing on the Beach tour. And I wrote a postcard to my parents because I was in Chicago for about 10 days, about what I was up to. And I swear to God, the entire postcard was about how Robert Smith had cut his hair. Like I was like, dear Mom and Dad, I'm having a good time. We went to the zoo and Robert Smith I wrote it all in caps. Like my parents care. But this was big news. This was the big news coming out of Chicago. It was a big deal because Robert had such an iconic look that for him to temporarily do it was,
it was covered in star hits. It was covered in smash hits. When the video for Hot, Hot, Hot premiered, that's all the VJs talked about was how he cut his hair before doing that video. It was a big deal. It was like,
it was a temporary lull, though, because he has committed to that look. It's been oft imitated, and he even now still has that look. So he didn't remain short-haired for long. Like you, Jenny, I followed every single thing Robert did. I read every lyric. I read every issue of Smash Hits, every interview. I studied the details of the videos. And here we are, 30-something years later, still talking about it. So, he changed all of our lives. The Cure changed our lives. So if he's listening, Robert, thank you very much. And we got to find that dollhouse. That's our next assignment.
We got to find it.
But thank you so much, Jenny. It's been fun catching up with you in general because it's been a while since I've seen you in person. But to get your insight as Sassy Magazine's top Cure fan has been an honor and a treat. Do you have anything you're working on in fashion or music that you want to fill us in on before we let you go?
Yeah, sure. I have been working on new music for the first time in a while. I've been touring a lot with Eagles of Death Metal over the past 3 years, which is super fun, and I love my bass playing. But the past couple months, I've been able to get together. Right now, I have about 6 songs, and there will be a 7-inch single coming out in approximately 3 months' time. So I'm really excited about that. And if anyone wants to check out my Cure cover, it's out there. I'm really happy with how it came out. You can hear the bass line that I took some of Simon's live stuff. So that's pretty recent. But new music. I'm really looking forward to laying that out there.
I'm looking forward to hearing that as well. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to everybody for listening. I'm Lyndsey Parker, and I've been joined today by John Hughes and Jennie Vee. And we want to thank you all for listening. Remember to give us a rate and review on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll catch you next time.
This was Totally 80s, the podcast dedicated to the music of the greatest decade ever. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Totally 80s, and please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until our next episode, catch you on the flip side.